Hi, my name is Shelomo Solson, founder of Purpose Creates Impact, host of the Teenage Impact podcast, where you will find inspiration to get over your struggles as a teenage kid. I was bullied, had anxiety, depression, had friends pass away, and battled confidence issues for a majority of my life. Whether you have the same issues as me, feel lonely, face challenges in your home or in school, I'm going to be interviewing people who overcame these struggles and provide you with tips on how you can overcome yours. By the end of this episode, I want you to rate and comment on what you think of the podcast. This will allow the podcast to be ranked higher and serve more teenagers. Hi, this is Shelomo Solson, founder and president of Purpose Creates Impact, the host of the Teenage Impact podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me. I have Jack Sernett. How are you, Jack?
Doing very well. Thanks for asking. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
No problem. This podcast is made for teenagers who are going through a specific struggle in their life, and we want to inspire them to overcome any struggle and adversity they have. I follow Jack vigorously on Instagram, and I see he's been in and out of the hospital for years and years and years. And I think Jack is an inspiration for many because he has such a strong viewpoint on life. And he doesn't let him being in the hospital affect him to the point he takes a positive outlook on life, and he controls one important aspect, and that's his mind. He's a motivational speaker, a coach for Jack Sernett Inspires. He currently lives in Kansas City, attended San Diego State University, lived in San Diego for about 7 years. His mission is to empower individuals, the community, and the world to live a calm, stress-free life by learning how to effectively overcome adversity. So just a little bit, I'm going to give you a structure on how I'm going to lay out this podcast and this video. Number one, you're going to be telling your story and your struggles you face as a teenager. Number two,
Sounds good.
How you overcame that struggle. And number three is any tips for teens who are facing the same exact struggle and what they can do to overcome it. Jack, you mentioned that you've had anxiety, you've had social anxiety, depression, lack of confidence. You want to commit suicide at a certain point. You felt inferior. You're a people pleaser. You fear to be a disappointment. You put a lot of pressure on yourself. You felt stressed, worried too much, diagnosed with a mental disorder. You felt like a failure. Can you dig deep? I guess it's a lot of things, but can you dig deep more on the anxiety part for now? Or tell your story?
Yeah. I can definitely tie in the anxiety into kind of my story. And I would say the anxiety was the catalyst for like all the other kind of struggles that I would end up going throughout my life leading up until, the age of 24 where I am now. Ever since I can remember when I was a little kid, my first memories were me having anxiety about usually something with school, whether it was a spelling test in like first grade. I mean, this is kindergarten, first grade. I remember being anxious. So anxiety was the first kind of, I don't know if you want to call it a symptom, but first thing I noticed that would end up be like the ripple effect to cause another thing, to cause another thing, to cause another thing. So basically, I mean, I could sit here for like an hour and talk about, elementary school and stuff like that. But basically anxiety started when I was a little kid. It got worse and worse and worse throughout the years because I never was told how to like handle it. You know what I mean? I didn't know how to tame my anxiety. And by the time I got to about 12 and beginning of my teenage years, about the age of 13 when I was in middle school, that anxiety was starting to cause a lot of stress. And I think anyone who has gone through anxiety, either for just a little bit, like a panic attack or an anxiety attack, or for years, like I had at that point, eventually it's going to start causing some stress and some frustration. So basically for me, the outline was I had anxiety first for years. That anxiety ended up turning into a lot of stress. By the time I was 15 or 16, I started to feel very depressed. And I didn't really even know what it was at the time. I didn't know all these terms. I was just had gone to enough doctors at that time that they were telling me I was showing signs of depression. So it was anxiety first, then stress, then depression. Then it became very kind of perfectionistic. I was a high achiever. Let's just say that much. During my teenage years, school was the most important thing to me in the world.
Mhm.
I would lose sleep over school. I became very unhealthy because of striving to be perfect in school. I remember I had straight A's my whole entire life, and I used to get frustrated if I got like a 98% because I was really pissed I didn't get 100. And it wasn't from like my parents. I'm sure a lot of people out there, especially in their teenage years, get a lot of pressure from their parents, maybe from their community they live in. But for me, it was all kind of like self-imposed pressure,
Self-inflicted.
self-inflicted. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So, that was, and it got to the point, and this is just kind of a quick little snippet through it, but it got to the point where the anxiety got so bad, the stress, the depression, the perfectionism got so bad where the only thing I had control over was what I ate. I couldn't control my thoughts, my emotions, how I reacted to certain things. I felt like I was totally just in an emotional roller coaster all the time. So I became very controlling about what I ate. And because of my kind of perfectionistic background throughout the beginning of my teenage years, I got very strict and perfectionistic with my food. And that led into an eating disorder and all this other kind of, stuff that was related to that. So, right now, and even when I was a teenager, when I was about 15 or 16, I grew to about 6'5", so 6 feet 5 inches.
Wow.
And when I was a junior in high school, by the time I was 17, because of all my, uh, struggles with anxiety and stress and all that kind of stuff that turned into the eating disorder, I ended up losing a bunch of weight because I was so strict with my food and I wouldn't eat a lot, as much as I should say, because of body image stuff. And I was just very hard on myself. There's many years where I didn't even look at myself in the mirror when I brushed my teeth. I always brush my teeth with my lights off. I spent about 4 years brushing my teeth in the pitch black because I couldn't
Wow.
stand looking myself in the face, so it was rough. But I got down to, and I don't really want to list a number because I don't want to really trigger anyone if they listen to this and they get triggered by weight. But, right now I'm 24 and I'm 6'5". I was a little bit less than half the weight I am right now when I was 17 years old. So I got really skinny, like very unhealthy skinny. And that turned into the point where kind of what I have briefly mentioned in the past to you is when I was 17, I had to actually drop out of high school for the last 3 months of the school year because I was getting so unhealthy and very, I was having suicidal thoughts and I was getting so sick. I had to go to the hospital sometimes. So the only hope that a lot of people were telling me was you should go to this residential facility in Wisconsin. And, I grew up in Kansas City, so Wisconsin's not like 5 minutes away, So I moved for the last 3 months of my junior year. I drove up to Wisconsin with my dad and he dropped me off and I was there for 3 months in this inpatient kind of residential facility that helped with eating disorders and a lot of mental health stuff like anxiety, depression. I got really good at just not putting so much pressure on myself by going there. And that saved my life. That completely turned my life around. I was on a consistent downward spiral to the point where, I didn't really feel like living anymore. And when that happens, you definitely got to change something because that's not the way things should be. You know what I mean? So that was very quick. I could sit here for like an hour talking about it, but basically that was it. You said the last thing you'd said just before I started talking was anxiety. And that, like I said, was the spark to a lot of my mental health struggles and eventually into my physical struggles. We can talk later on a little bit about what I've gone through recently in the last couple of years, but throughout my teenage years, that was pretty much the gist of it. So.
Sure. And let's go back to where you had to drop out the last 3 months.
Yeah.
What's going through your mind when you had to do that? make that move?
Yeah, it was lots of uncertainty, because it wasn't like, until I started losing a bunch of weight, it wasn't like no one really knew I was struggling with anything. You know, I was a varsity athlete. I was perfect grades. You know, I could put on a mask really easily at school during the day. I could act happy and put on a fake smile. But, you know, I'd go home at night and just be miserable. Go home after school and just, you know, oh man, it was rough. But
So many people can relate.
yeah, you know, and a lot of people, even when I was losing weight, some people just thought I was just sick, you know, like a physical health thing. It wasn't necessarily because I was going through a lot with my emotional and mental health, and also some eating disorder stuff. Um, so when I left, a lot of people were like, "Oh, you know, what the heck happened?" You know. And so, but like, to answer your questions more specifically, yeah, it was something I was willing to do because nothing had worked to that point. You know, it was worth a try. Like,
Hmm.
the worst case scenario is it doesn't work and I don't turn my life around and I'm just back to where I am right now. So, you know, I might as well try, right? You know, the last thing I'd want to do is look back in 2 or 3 years from that point and maybe think, man, if I would have done that, what would be different? You know?
Hmm.
So I definitely wanted to just give it a try. And sometimes that's what you got to do. Is one of my favorite lines is, what you resist persists, you know? So I
That's
was for many
powerful.
years resisting getting better. I was self-sabotaging, kind of just getting comfortable not being okay, which sounds weird, you know? But I just told myself, man, if you want to do anything positive with your life, you got to go do this and turn your life around. And I also knew there was a lot of positive reviews and stuff about this place I was going to. It was called Rogers Memorial Hospital
Okay.
in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. So it's kind of a mouthful, but it's like northern Wisconsin, close to Canada. And yeah, I was there and completely saved my life, you know?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Now touch base a little bit about how you said you felt like a failure. You were a people pleaser. You feared being a disappointment. And what aspect are you talking about?
Yeah. So
Grades, what you can
yeah,
accomplish.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Grades and sports. Those are the two biggest things in my life.
What did you play?
I played everything growing up,
Uh-huh.
meaning like everything besides like ice hockey, because they don't really have it out here in Kansas. But you know, I played every sport growing up, and then once I got older into like high school, I was very competitive with soccer, and I would travel the country and
Wow.
with my club soccer team, we would. You know, there's a couple years my freshman, sophomore in high school where I would be in a different state for a tournament. You know, every other weekend I'd be out of town for a tournament. So um, that was my main sport in high school, was soccer, and that was the you know, it was athletic pressure and performance and feeling like I don't want to let anyone down, you know, with that, and also with grades. You know what I mean? So, and some people listening to this might want, like, what started all that? You know what I mean? And some stuff I can't really pinpoint, but I do know that I remember super clearly when I was in kindergarten. We were playing kickball, and I was able to kick and I hit a home run like every time I was up to bat or whatever. You know, I kicked the ball the farthest, and I got
In
that
kindergarten.
positive reinforcement from like my
Yeah.
friends in my class. You know, and I was starting to get known as like the best athlete. You know what I mean? And then in my mind, as a little tiny toddler, I was like, oh, that means I need to be the best at everything. So ever since then, I've put pressure on myself for many years. Now I'm nothing like I was when I was a teenager, but up until, the culmination of my struggles when I was 17, it was just constant. I had this image I had to live up to, be the best at everything, be perfect, be known as the perfect, school person, perfect student, and perfect athlete. So it
And,
all kind of started back when I was 6.
and did any of your teachers or parents, did they recognize that and try to get you out of that mentality?
Yeah, it took a while. It wasn't, like I said, I was really good at kind of covering up a lot of my internal personal struggles for a long time. My parents didn't even know I was struggling with an eating problem until I finally started losing a bunch of weight. Then it was pretty obvious. So it wasn't until about my freshman year in high school, when I was 16 years old, that someone finally kind of, my parents did, but also kind of like, mentors that were like older adults or coaches, they would kind of catch on and realize, like, man, you're going down a slippery slope here. It's just going to continue to get worse if you don't try to do something about it now. So people did recognize it. One of my coaches, my high school coach for my soccer team in high school, noticed it. I had a psychologist I would see since second grade, and I
Wow.
still talk to him this day occasionally. I don't meet with him regularly, but he noticed it when I got into high school. He was noticing how severe it was getting, and it was taken away from my enjoyment in life. I like to think I don't regret a lot of things, because I really don't. I did everything I've kind of wanted to do so far, but I do regret not enjoying my teenage years more. And that's the hard part about going through emotional trauma, mental trauma, physical trauma, is it takes away a lot of joy and happiness and good memories from life.
That's absolutely so true what you said about elementary school, how that one specific moment can
Yeah.
trigger years to come of things in your head, in your mind, in your head mindset. Because I told a story in one of my podcast episodes, my first one, regarding elementary school, how in the first day of elementary school, I finished my lunch last and I went to take a nap last. And I was crying. And from that day, I thought I was going to do everything last. So anytime last one to finish a test, last one to finish a race, last one to get picked on the team. And I was doing that to myself, and it all triggered from that one event in elementary school.
That's
It's crazy.
super, super, interesting to hear that, because that's pretty similar, to my scenario.
Yeah.
And the crazy part is, some people don't even have anything they can think of.
Yeah.
When we're before the age of 7, we don't have that part in our brain that develops kind of memories, you know what I mean, very well. Like, I only remember a few specific events from when I was a kid. So a lot of people who are going through stuff as a teenager might not really have something they can pinpoint as like the start to their kind of struggles. You know what I mean? So
Uh,
I'm just saying that because I don't want anyone to ever beat themselves up because they think, oh, they're the problem because there's no event that started it. Just
yeah.
because there's nothing you can think of doesn't mean there wasn't something that happened. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So.
Absolutely. Now, we went over some of your problems in your teenage years. You mentioned that you've in the past couple of years you've been going through some stuff. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, yeah. So, like we've talked about in the past, you and I, is I'm not up here. I'm not a millionaire. I don't own a fancy, gigantic business. I'm not a celebrity. I'm not a professional athlete. But I am a man who has gone through his fair share of adversities. And it hasn't really stopped. But that's the beauty of it, right? And I've gotten better at handling every little setback and adversity that's come my way throughout the years. If these last 2 years of what I'm about to talk about, kind of the chronic illness stuff I've gone through, happened to me when I was a teenager, it would have been a whole different animal. I wouldn't have been able to deal with it as well because I've just gotten more stable and more mature and more confident in my ability to handle things. And, really quick before I start the word adversity gets thrown around a lot. And basically the definition of adversity is just difficulties or misfortunes. That's really it. So, and there's different levels to it. You know what I mean? It's not really good to put a number on something, but there's different severities and levels of adversity. I would say spilling coffee on your lap, that's adversity, technically,
Yeah.
but that's not nearly as big of a deal as like, almost dying because of a health problem. You know what I mean? So it's all different, but the way to overcome it is the same. That's the cool part. And we can talk about that later. But basically the last 2 years, starting when I was 22 and I'm 24 now. So starting in 2017 and it's July 2019 now. I was diagnosed with stage 3 chronic kidney disease, and which is not good. there's different stages of kidney disease. And when you get to stage 4 and stage 5, that's like dialysis and transplant level.
Mm-hmm.
So luckily I'm not there, hopefully ever. But yeah, I just, all of a sudden my kidneys, my ureters, and my bladder just started malfunctioning. They stopped working, and it took over 2 years for stuff to finally kind of get settled down. I had 12 surgeries since the beginning of 2018, since January 2018 until February of 2019. I had 12 surgeries.
That's rough.
Last year in 2018, I don't know the exact number, but I've looked at my records and I kind of kept track just for future reference. But in 2018, I was in the hospital approximately 275 days. So, over 3/4 of the year I was in the hospital. It was rough. When you're in the hospital every 12 days or less, it's kind of hard to be a productive human being. You know what I mean? You're almost at the mercy of your circumstances, which is tough. Because every 12 days or less, I was back in the hospital with a really bad sepsis infection or with a surgery. So, I'd be in the hospital for 4 or 5 days with a kidney infection or needing a surgery on my bladder. And then within 12 days or less from when I got out, I'd be right back in, So
Wow.
that was my life for 2 years, you know what I mean? Last year I lost a lot of weight, lost about 80 pounds. Before I got sick, I was big into weightlifting.
I remember following you when you
Yeah.
big into weightlifting.
Yeah, I was a competitive CrossFit athlete and I did some weightlifting competitions and stuff. So, and I'm getting back into it now. I'm not going to ever compete again, but I'm getting back into lifting weights again. So I'm gaining some weight back. But yeah, it was just a complete halt in my life. It's tough because at the age of 22, I was doing everything I wanted. I had no health problems. I was a full-time motivational speaker and I could work out as much as I wanted to. And then all of a sudden, one day, it all came to a complete halt. And needless to say, I learned how to be patient, because when you have so many dreams and aspirations and you can't do anything to strive towards them for 2 years, you definitely got to get good at being patient, because if not, you're going to drive yourself crazy, So
Because at that point, you just want to be alive. That's it.
exactly.
That's
Yeah. And people might think that's a little extreme to say, but it's actually true. Like sepsis has been a national news story for a couple of times now in the last month. It kills more people in America every year than breast cancer and a couple other diseases combined, which is crazy. And sepsis is an infection in the blood. And if you don't treat it in time, it can start making certain internal organs stop working. So it's very dangerous. And I've had it 11 times since January of 2018. So needless to say, it's a little scary. So there is your perspective. We've talked about perspective in the past, you and I, and, your perspective certainly changes that, little things don't bug you when you are preoccupied with big things like trying to survive. You know what I mean?
Okay. So we talked about your adversity, your struggles, and what you've gone through in the past. You've had anxiety, social anxiety, depression. You've had a lack of confidence. You want to commit suicide at certain points. You were a people pleaser. You dropped out of school in the last 3 months. All these little things, you've been in and out of hospital in the past 2 years. Let's talk about how you overcame those struggles and
Right.
how you had that mental shift where you said, okay, I'm going through these struggles, I'm accepting these struggles, and I can't change what I'm going through, but I could change my mindset. How did you overcome that?
Yeah. So it wasn't right. It wasn't quick. Let's just say that much.
Absolutely.
It's taken me, I'm 24 now. I'll be 25 in September. It's taken me, for only the past year to year and a half have I feel like I really have a good grip on how to handle things that happen. A lot of people are at the mercy of their circumstances. Their emotions and their mood is dictated on what happens to them from moment to moment. And finally, for about the last year and a half, I feel like I'm just always at peace and, nothing really can faze me, which is, I hope that doesn't come across as cocky. It's just confidence. It's nice to wake up in the morning and not have anxiety, because every when I wake up, I know I'll be able to handle whatever kind of comes my way, But to answer your question better is there's a lot of, when I was going through my struggles as a kid and leading up until, as an adult now, is you get lots of advice, right? I mean, I'm sure you have
Oh
yourself.
yeah.
A lot of people want to give you their 2 cents and their wisdom, and that's great. I think it's fantastic. Or if you open up social media, if you open up Facebook and Instagram or Twitter right now and you scroll for about a couple minutes, I bet you find someone's, words of wisdom on there, or advice on how to handle things and do things in your life. It can become very overwhelming. And it did for me. For me, I was like, oh, what should I do? Should I listen to that person? Should I do that? Should I do that? So I just simplified it. I broke it down into very simple things. And the simplest thing I could break it down to is what I have control over.
Okay.
And the only thing humans, you and I, have control over is our thoughts and our actions. So that's all I focused on, was my thoughts and actions. Instead of thinking about, oh, this guy said do that, let me try that, but this guy said that, but she said that, it's like it can get very confusing. And if you have like a 30-step plan towards everything, that's a lot to kind of. So I focused on 2 things, not 50 things. And I didn't try 1,000 things at once. I just did a couple things bit by bit, and eventually my whole personality, my habits, and my life changed for the better. So like I said, thoughts and actions. A lot of people stress and get anxious and depressed about external things that they have zero control over. For example, my health. I was doing everything the doctors were telling me, and I was still getting sicker, and I was having to get more surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
So I literally had no control over what was happening to my body. It just got to the point where my disease got so bad that the only thing I can control over is how I handled it mentally, and then what I did, so
Mm-hmm.
thoughts and actions. And that's really what I started to do. I didn't really become really good at it until, like I said, about a year and a half ago up until now. But even when I was a teenager, and going through a lot of sports injuries, I had leg saving surgery and some really other bad sports surgeries and stuff. And I would do it I would kind of get good at just focusing on my perspective, my thoughts, my actions, what I can control. But a lot of times I'd get away from it as well, And finally, in the past couple of years with all this like chronic health stuff, it's almost forced me to become a master at just controlling what's between the ears. Because if you can't control your mind, you're screwed. You're at the mercy of what happens to you, which is a shame. It's not a fun way to live. Trust me. And I'm sure most people, you included, it's definitely not fun. And like your question was, what was that kind of shift you said?
Mm-hmm.
For me, I had, like I just said, I kind of tinkered back and forth with getting good at handling things, but then I'd also let things really get me down. Finally, about 2 years ago, so like the 3rd or 4th time I was in the hospital with my kidney problems, I thought there wasn't like someone who said anything. I just randomly thought to myself, there has to be a better way to do this. Like, if this is as miserable as I'm going to be, there's just no way this is the only way to handle things. So my vision was really bad a lot in the hospital. The meds they had me on made my vision really blurry. So I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't watch my, computer. I
Yeah.
was just there with my thoughts. So I thought to myself, wow, this is going to really suck if I don't, if I don't get good with handling, kind of what pops into my head. So I kind of just, I didn't really look at myself in the mirror because I couldn't really see very well, but I basically just did one of those like accountability mirror practice tasks, where I just thought to myself, what can I do to get better? And I became very self-aware in that moment, meaning I quit all of the BS. I stopped lying to myself. A lot of people,
Self-awareness.
exactly, dude. That's so important. I did for many, many years was just lying to myself. I was in denial. I didn't admit my faults and my weaknesses and stuff. And I kind of put them under a rug. And like I said to you before, what you resist will persist, and I
Mm-hmm.
resisted all my struggles thinking, oh, no, that's not really me or whatever. But I never even thought about the alternative, which is shifting my mind and getting better at handling things. Because if you can't handle adversity, then your life's going to be one big roller coaster of emotions, and that's not
Absolutely.
a fun way to live. It really sucks. It's not enjoyable. So that's why I'm passionate. And I think I'm assuming that's probably why you're passionate about helping teens
Uh-huh.
and young adults, because if we can learn how to handle adversity or setbacks or whatever you want to call it when we're young, that's going to set up success for the rest of our life. Whereas if we have a smooth sailing life and just kind of, have nothing really go wrong
Uh-huh.
until we're an adult in our 40s, 50s, or 60s, that's going to be a struggle bus to handle that and to deal with that. I'm in public a lot. Every day I see people, like just even in the grocery store, I see adults who will just freak out and get super upset and mad about like the line being too long or
The
something.
smallest things.
Yeah. And it's like, gosh, if they could have
Small to
learned how
life.
to handle adversity when they were younger, then this wouldn't ever be the case. So basically, I'm very grateful. This is a really long answer, so I'm sorry if I'm talking too long, but I'm very lucky that I've had adversities because it's built my character. If I would have had nothing happen to me personally throughout my life so far, it would be rough when something did go wrong.
Mhm.
So I'm very lucky. I've been able to learn from my setbacks.
How, so you were self-conscious about your body for the longest time. How did you
Very long
overcome
time.
that?
Yeah, so I one of the things that you've said in the beginning, kind of going through the stuff I went through, was like social anxiety. And
Uh-huh.
I cared way too much for many years about what other people thought about me,
Mhm.
uh, other people's opinions. And, from a young kid, this is kind of similar to how when I was a little 6-year-old, I had that one kind of moment that kind of like set up struggles for many years to come. Well, I was always kind of a muscular kid. I was able to put on, I was doing sports all the time as a little kid. And I got this nickname when I was like in first grade, Six Pack Jack.
Six-pack Jack.
Six Pack Jack. So that was like another event where I'm like, oh, I have a six pack, so I need to maintain this perfect physique and look. I have
Mhm.
to live up to that name. I can't get overweight or anything. You know what I mean? I got to be that because everyone knows of me as that guy. So that kind of started my perfectionism and body image. I remember in third grade, I would be pushing my stomach in, thinking, oh, that's going to make me skinnier. So I became very self-conscious of my body. And the way I got over it was, um, someone told me one time, treat yourself like someone you love. And I don't
I've
know
heard
what it, I
Yeah.
know, I feel like I knew that even when I was a little kid. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? But it's super hard to do and easy to forget. But for some reason, when that person told me that, it just totally flipped a switch in my mind. And I'm like, gosh, I am such a bully to myself. I don't, the way I look and talk about myself, you know, when I was younger, I would never do that to anyone I cared about or even anyone I don't care about.
Mhm.
That's just a mean thing to do. So it was probably when I was 18 or 19, I finally just started realizing, first of all, when you're in public, a lot of people aren't even thinking about you, even though you're paranoid they might be. And it's impossible to be perfect. I was living
Mhm.
up, I was trying to be that perfect everything, like we've talked about in the past, perfectionism. And same thing with my body image. I had to be this perfect physique and I couldn't have an ounce of fat on me. And even when I was getting these compliments, I would just throw them away and be like, oh, but they're just saying that. I got to get better. So, but I got over it by just listening to what this person told me when I was 17 or 18 years old. Treat yourself like someone you love. So pretty much immediately I started to get the habit of being kind to myself, meaning it started simple. I had to, every day, I wrote down 3 things I like about myself.
Uh-huh.
And at least one of them had to be a physical thing, not just like my characteristics or personality. And that's the key is, you could talk to as many teenagers as you want about how to turn their life around or how to fix something or how to get better at their body image. But if you only do it once every here and there, it's not going to change anything. The way we as humans learn stuff after the age of 7 is either through hypnosis, repetition, those are the two main ways. And repetition. So it's just like how you learn anything. How'd you learn how to ride a bike? You had to repeat it constantly. How'd you learn how to hit a baseball? You had to constantly practice hitting the baseball. It's the same thing with my self-talk and body image. I had to constantly practice being nicer to myself, writing down things I liked about myself, and not lying, being honest, like really believing it.
Yeah.
And when I did have bad thoughts about myself, I got really good at catching them and reversing them. So I'd
Okay.
always have a couple
Extremely important.
affirmations in my mind, to help reverse kind of these negative thoughts about myself.
Okay. And let's go on to the third section of
Perfect.
the interview is, I mean, you touched base a little bit on how you overcame it, but what about for other people who say are not confident in their own skin, who are in and out in the hospital, who are a people pleaser? What tips do you have for them?
Yeah, I think first of all, not every one thing is going to work for everyone. Does that make sense? So
Yeah,
like
it's not a one size fits all.
exactly, it's not a one size fits all thing. But the first thought that came to mind that worked for me the best, and it's worked with a lot of people I've coached and also talked to and known, is when you just asked me, what would you tell someone or give them tips about someone who's not comfortable in their own skin and kind of lacks self-esteem and confidence, is I think that person should just know the fact that you are one of a kind. There's never been one person, this is a fact, this is not some cliche
Yeah.
opinion. There's never been a person ever with your brain chemistry, your thoughts, your characteristics, your emotions, your triggers, your positive attributions ever in the history of humankind, and there never will be in the future. No one person will ever be like you ever again. It's like a
What makes
snowflake.
someone
All
unique is
snowflakes are
themselves.
unique and different. So that's how you got to look at yourself as just as that. You're one of a kind, and when you can really believe that and know that to be true, being confident with yourself and okay with your flaws will become a lot easier. So that kind of addresses that kind of side of things, because I think if you're not confident with yourself and you're not comfortable in your own skin, it's hard to really do anything positive, because it's like how could you ever, that one line that I've heard a lot is, how could you ever love someone if you can't love yourself?
Absolutely. It's true because I used to be very self-conscious. I went to speech and ESOL class for 7 years, and I used to be self-conscious on how I spoke. I got picked
Yeah.
on for the way I spoke. I had improper grammar. I still have improper grammar a lot of times, but it's okay. I've accepted it. And I had a mentor tell me that you don't, as a speaker, people are not going to listen to you because you have perfect grammar. You say things perfectly. They're going to relate to you because of your message. So people don't really care about your imperfections. They might say it as a joke and you might take it the wrong way sometimes, or sometimes they actually do mean it. But the day you actually can accept your imperfections is the day you become free.
That's exactly right. That is that's a really good way of saying it. I recently, you might have seen this, I
Yeah.
recently said something on social media about, that famous African proverb that says, if there's no enemy within, the enemy
Uh-huh.
outside can do us no harm. That could not be more true. That's basically the summation of what we've been talking about this whole time.
Yeah.
When you're good with yourself, no one it will be capable of hurting your feelings or getting you
Uh-huh.
down. Don't give them that power, So when you accept your speech flaws, or whatever you want to call them, your grammar mistakes and stuff like that, it's no one will be capable of beating you up over it, And
Yeah.
it's hard. Gosh, if I would have heard that when I was a teenager, I wouldn't really catch on. It didn't really make sense until the last couple of years. But
Yeah.
when you can actually be at peace with yourself and your characteristics and your good things and not so good things about you as a human being, then no one else out there, the enemy outside can do you no harm. And when like you said, people would make fun of you or kind of bully you, and I'm sure there's tons of people who will watch this and listen to this who have had some bullying and stuff like that
Uh-huh.
go on. And I even had it, dude. Oh my gosh. I mean, I was always injured a lot and on crutches growing up, so I would get made fun of a lot for that, and it's never enjoyable, but once you get older, you realize, one, I kind of feel bad for that person. So like if someone was going to comment and be like a, internet troll on this podcast, start to
Yeah.
attack you, I would feel bad for that person because
Yeah.
something's obviously not right with them if they
Yeah.
have to go out and beat someone else up over, because if there's no enemy within you, there's no reason for you to go attack someone else. Because
Yeah. Many times bullies are self-conscious about themselves.
oh yeah, oh, man, there's always something. There's some sort of insecurity that's driving them to do that. I really believe no one just chooses to be mean. There's a reason. There's a past emotional trauma or event that caused them to be that way. So
Mhm.
that's how you can kind of look at that.
And you wanted to commit suicide at one point of your life. What made you change that?
Yeah, yeah, it was.
And what tips do you have for other people who have the same exact thought?
Yeah, there was many days where I would pray I didn't wake up, and I kept wondering when I did wake up the next morning, like what the heck, why is this happening? You know what I mean? And the one thing that helped me is I don't really want to quit because there's always that small chance tomorrow I could start to get better.
Mm-hmm.
Because that would really stink. It's kind of like that analogy that there's that picture I've seen before of two miners and they're like digging a tunnel and someone quits and they're like 3 inches away
I've seen
from
that.
digging.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of diamonds, and gold. It's kind of like, man, that would be really unfortunate if I tried to end my life and did commit suicide. But, the next day I would have gotten better because I would have met someone or something would have changed, that I always held on to that little sliver of hope that soon something will change. And I think a lot of times for people to change, they need a wake up call. That's usually what sparks change. No one just, a major change, I should say. So for me, my wake up call I got on March 6th, 2015 was I actually attempted to commit suicide and I survived. It's a really long story, but basically I should have been off a lot worse. A lot of the people in the medical field and who like the EMTs and stuff, they're saying, man, you're very lucky. You know what I mean? And that was my wake up call, realizing, wow, I really feel like whatever you believe in, God or the man, I really
Yeah.
feel like I was given a second chance. You know what I mean? So going through that and surviving, a moment where I tried to not be alive anymore, that was my wake up call. And it doesn't need to be that extreme for some people going through, suicidal thoughts and suicidal ideations. But I would say is there's always hope. There is. And I don't know if I like hope. I like the word faith. Hope is almost like wishing, but there's
I
always,
love
you
faith.
gotta
Yeah.
keep the faith that one day things will get better. Faith is almost like saying I have faith I will end up enjoying life more. I'm confident I will end up enjoying life more. For me, it just so happened it took that extreme event where I survived, a suicide attempt. And from that moment on, my life completely did a 180 transition to a better life. But there's always an opportunity to turn your life around. I met this guy. He spoke at my high school. He survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. He's like
Oh
the
yeah.
one
I
of
saw
people
that post.
who did it. And not only him, but a lot of people have done surveys on people who've survived suicide attempts. And there's something like, I can't remember the exact percentage, so don't quote me on this, but there's something like a little over 90% of these people regretted it the second they jumped, you know? And for me, the second I woke up from like blacking out and stuff after I tried to end my life, I totally regretted it. Like I feel like I made a mistake. And so that's, I think, really powerful. People can understand that is
Mm-hmm.
it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And a lot of times when it happens, like this studies have shown, is 90% of these people regret it after the fact. They're like, they wish they wouldn't have done it. You know what I mean?
What should they do if they do feel like commit suicide?
Yeah, I would say, you know, I think ego is the enemy with a lot of personal health, mental health, emotional health struggles. The way I got better was, one is I asked for help. I threw my ego out the door. I knew that it wasn't just all me, you know, and help meaning that's very broad. I would say, you should, if you're self-aware enough to realize you have suicidal ideations and thoughts, you need to have some sort of, plan set in place, to the point where if you do become dangerous and you don't really trust yourself, you need to have someone you can reach out to, or something that can happen where you will be getting a safe environment.
Mhm.
So it's different for everyone. There's suicidal hotlines. Those I've mixed opinions on those. There's, I've talked to and known people who've just gone straight to the ER and just, walked into the ER and kind of just said, "Hey, I'm struggling with this, and this. I need help." But I think really at the end of the day, no great person has ever done anything great alone. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a team around me, a support system, and people to help me. Because if I could do it all on my own, I wouldn't have ever gone through any of the stuff I went through, So I would recommend that people just throw their ego out the door. It's okay not to be okay, and you don't have to tell the whole world. For many years in high school, only a couple people in the entire high school knew I was suicidal, and that was my counselor and the psychologist in the school. Those are the only two people. So, it wasn't known by everyone. Just because you tell someone, "Hey, I could use you if I get really down in the dumps, and suicidal one day," doesn't mean everyone has to know. And if they do, there shouldn't be a stigma behind it. Um, it's a health struggle. No one looks at someone different. Like for me, it was so fascinating. When I was in the hospital, I never got a weird look or a comment because of my physical ailments. It was just normal. But the second someone found out, or the nurses would ask about my health history, and I would say, like, "Yeah, I've struggled in the past with depression stuff," a lot of times they'd look at me a little different, and that's a shame. And that shouldn't be the
That
case.
sucks.
And that shouldn't be the case though with like the people who we're trying to give advice to right now is, don't give anyone that ability, that power to put you in this category and give you stick a stigma on you, label you as anything. It's perfectly fine. There's so many people out there who have done so many great things in their life, and they have mental health struggles as well. I mean, it's so common. If you were maybe like the only person on the planet who are going through something, maybe you might feel a little self-conscious,
Yeah.
like you're the problem. But the fact is,
So
there
many
are
people.
billions of people out there who struggle with some form or another of stress, anxiety, depression, mental disorders, anything like that. It's everywhere. So there's no reason to feel shame behind that. I have a tattoo on my arm that says "unashamed."
I love it.
I am completely 100% unashamed of my past, my struggles, my everything.
You should
There's
write a
no
book
shame.
on it.
Well, it's me. It's my story.
Yeah. Any last tips for any teenagers that are watching this, Jack?
Yeah, I would say for any teenagers or even anyone watching this, I would. One is nothing. You don't get good at anything on the first try. So for me, the way I turned my personality, my mindset, my perspective, my anxiety and stress, the way I got that to get turned around was just constant repetition. The first couple of times, first couple of months, I tried to get less stressed and anxious, and I practiced handling adversity better. I sucked. I was terrible. It wasn't that great. But the key is not stopping and not quitting, because even if you look at if you watch a sporting event, none of those guys were that good the first time they tried it. It takes lots of practice and repetition. So I would say keep that in mind. Is a lot of people might listen to this and try a couple things out, like, "Oh, maybe I'll try to write down 3 things I like about myself every day." But after 2 days, if they don't feel like they're feeling better, they might just quit. And
Yeah.
that's not what you should do,
It's a lifelong journey.
Exactly. For me, I'm never recovered, always recovering. I never have it all figured out. Every day is a constant battle, but it's a good battle. Battle might have a negative connotation on it. Every day I wake up and the old Jack creeps up from time to time, but I have ways now to handle it and reverse it and not go down that slippery slope again. So basically the last thing I would say is really embody the fact that life is not at all what happens to you. The only thing that matters is how you respond to what happens to you. I really don't think adversity defines us, but how you respond to your adversity is how people remember you.
That's powerful.
It's really easy to forget the person who struggled with this, and this, but it's really hard to forget how they handled it and how they overcame it, So it's important how you respond to your adversity. That's the only thing that matters. You have a choice. Everything in life will either make you bitter or better, and it's honestly up to you. So
That's great, man. Jack, where can teens, where can my followers find you?
Yeah, you can find me at jacksernett.com. And I'm sure if they don't know how to spell that, you probably can put it somewhere for them to see it, on your website or something. But jacksernett.com. On Instagram, I am at Jack Sernett, and then Facebook and Twitter and all their social media, I'm just Jack Sernett. But like I said, Instagram is I am Jack Sernett. And check out my website. I'll have new speaking videos up there soon. Take whatever you want from there. You know what I mean? Just like, I'm sure a lot of people might resonate with some of the stuff we talked about today, and some people might resonate with only a few things, but take what you want out of it, use what you think will help you. And that's all that matters,
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jack, for this interview. And for my followers, if you haven't done so, if you're tuning in from my YouTube channel and you haven't done so, subscribe to Purpose Creates Impact. Hit that like button, comment, let us know what you think of this interview. If you're tuning in from my Teenage Impact podcast, then subscribe to my podcast channel and comment, rate it, because the more you rate it, the more you comment, the higher ranking it'll be, and the more teenagers' lives I can impact. Thank you, Jack, and hope everyone has a great day.
Rock on. Sweet.